Hello, and welcome to the next retrospective, where I currently look at classic and obscure retro games across a range of different platforms. So apologies for the last episode, which was completely dry and dull because I was just rabbiting on for far too long with you staring at an emulation screen. I'll try and improve that this time around as much as I can. The main thing is that you can always fast forward if you want to skip past and just have a look at the games itself. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, the idea is that I'm looking at games particularly from my childhood that I have very fond memories of growing up, and which I'll try and share memories about how I first played those games and discovered them, and as well as any other facts and details about that game. So the title I'm going to look at today is not just one title but two titles. So the first one I'm going to be looking at is Buck Rogers, that you can see on screen now, and the Planet of Zoom. And the other game I'll be looking at afterwards is a game called Tapper, which was also released by US Gold in the early 80s. So both titles were Sega arcade conversions, which were developed originally in the US, and US Gold was a new label at the time that was created by Jeff Brown with the sole purpose of bringing in games from the US that we weren't necessarily familiar with. And it was thanks to the company we got to discover games like Tapper and Buck Rogers, but also other gems like Bruce Lee and Beachhead, for instance. But it's these games in particular, the reason why I'm covering them is because of the significance they have to me as a kid, which is obviously because that's the theme of what I'm doing. But these particular two titles were the very first two games that I ever played on any computer, full stop. So the Commodore 64 was the very first computer that I ever played on. So at the time I wasn't really familiar with computers at all. I had no access to them. I'd seen arcade machines. I think I'd maybe even played on an arcade machine. But the only sort of exposure to games at home or in a household was playing LCD electronic games, and in particular the Game & Watch series by Nintendo and Ball, the very first game that they come out with. But that was it. So it was sort of in early 1988 that I went over to my sister's house. So my sister was a bit older than me, and I would go over to their house and stay where she lived with her husband, my brother-in-law. And I used to mostly go over kind of as like a sort of a mini holiday because we didn't have any money at home. My parents had no money to travel anywhere, and my sister used to therefore invite us over and go and spend a couple of days just to have a change of scenery or do something a bit different. And sometimes we'd go out, I don't know, into Canterbury or something on the train. But it was in early 1988 that I went over with my mum one particular half term, and it was during one evening when I was only about 6 or 7 at a time, and I was struggling to go to bed. I didn't want to go to bed because they're trying to get me into bed at like 8 o'clock or something, and I was full of life and energy and hyperactivity, and I just wanted to stay up all night because I was quite excited to be somewhere new. So my sister, she decided to try and coax me into going to sleep. She sort of bribed me with the promise of getting out this Commodore 64 the next morning and being able to hook it up to a TV and playing some games on it. And that completely piqued my interest, and I was like straight away saying yes, okay. Went straight to bed because I was extremely excited because I'd heard about computers and I knew roughly what it was going to be. I knew it was going to be some kind of arcade machine experience, but in the household, connected to a TV screen. So I was really fascinated, and I kind of went to bed, struggled to get to sleep, but I was in bed, and that was the key thing. And then, true to her word, in the morning, she dug out this big blue box, Commodore 64, hooked it up to her TV, and dug out a shoebox of games that they had, which included Buck Rogers, Tapper, and I think it was Hungry Horace. What else was there? Moon Buggy by Anne Rogg, Valhalla, and The Hobbit, and that kind of thing. And yeah, I just remember she kind of switched it all on, and we were greeted by the classic blue screen with a flashing ready, and she'd type on a keyboard and stuff would happen, and it was just magical. You could interact with your TV screen for the first time. But it was looking through the box of games, we were kind of trying to decide what to load up first, and Buck Rogers just stood out straight away for me. It was mainly because you've got this kind of like superhero guy on the front and the space theme to it. As a 6 or 7 year old, I was heavily into space theme stuff. I was watching The Last Starfighter at the time on VHS, and I was wearing it out and driving my parents slowly insane. So this was a natural first game to want to pick out and try and load up. I remember looking on the back and seeing the screenshot, which is just a mock-up, but seeing spaceships that you can shoot at and flying along a terrain in some kind of semi sort of 3D viewpoint. It just looked great, so it was a natural, really. And that's what I'm going to load up now, just to kind of give you a view. So actually, before I go back on there, the other thing to note about this is the actual copy that my brother and sister used to own back in the day. So when they eventually upgraded to a Commodore Amiga, they kind of give their 64 away to another member of the family, but they allow me to kind of pick some games out of the bundle, and I managed to keep hold of Buck Rogers and Tapper and a few others, which was quite lucky. So I'm kind of very sort of lucky to still have the original game that I very first played, the actual one, and it's surprising actually that it's still in fairly good nick, because anything I had as a kid I didn't really look after back in the time. This has still got its inlay and its instruction manual, and the tape's still in relatively good nick. But yeah, I'm really kind of chuffed to still have that, and have that in sort of my collection. So I'm going to just kick the game off now. So I'm going to load it from the tape image so you can see. So at the time, sort of loading games up used to take, on the 64 in the early days, there was no fast loaders, so it used to take about 5 or 10 minutes for a game to load up. But I was kind of lucky with this one as an introduction, because they used Nova Load, which is a fast loader. I always love that funny sort of screeching sound at the beginning. So yeah, this uses Nova Load, and this is a custom sort of variant of Nova Load with like you could build like a loading screen and your own music and sort of master your games with it. And this particular screen was done by a chap called Gary Sabin that we discovered in later years, thanks to I think his nephew sort of come forward. Sadly revealed that Gary had passed away quite some years ago, and he gave all of his discs to, or various different work discs to this. Actually, I don't think it was his nephew. I think it was a friend of the family or something. Anyway, he gave this guy a bunch of work discs and helped to get them preserved. And I think there was like a copy of Gary Sabin's source code to the US Gold Loader, which revealed that he'd done the American music, which is quite cool. So we never knew who'd sort of made this tune or anything. So now it's credited properly in High Voltage SIG collection. But I love seeing this US Gold sort of loading screen. It really invokes memories of my childhood every time I see it. And I remember, I'll just pause for the title. Yeah, I remember when we first loaded this game up, sort of seeing that grey Nova Load screen, that funny screeching sound, and then the screen with the American flag and the scrolling message and that. It was all kind of magical. It's the first time I'd ever really seen anything like that on a TV screen, and something that I knew I was going to interact with. It was very, very exciting, and seeing the counter going down, waiting for it to load, just built it up even further. And it wasn't long until the game loaded, like you just said. I think the first person who played it was probably my sister or my brother-in-law, just to show us how the game worked and kind of get us familiar. I'd never used a joystick before, for instance, so I kind of had to get used to that. The one thing I'll say about this game before I start is that it's not the best game in the world. It doesn't have a great reputation, unfortunately. I absolutely love the game, but that's clearly because I've got rose-tinted specs on, because this has a lot of personal connection to me, of being the first game I ever played. It's always going to have a special place in my heart. But genuinely, I've played crap games on the 64 in the past, and I've loaded them up in recent times, and I've seen that they're rubbish, even though I kind of enjoyed them at the time. But Buck Rogers is a game that I can still load up today, and I still enjoy playing it. To me, it's still fun. Like you'll see in Zap 64, I feel they're a little bit harsh towards the game. Sure, it's not perfect, and it's not the best game in the world, and it can get repetitive, as you'll see, but I think there's far worse games. So I'm going to show you now, and you can see what you think for yourself. So just to talk for the game briefly, so you've got this ship which you can fly up and down. If you go towards the bottom of the towards the ground, you move a lot slower, which makes it easier to go through these poles, and you have to go through so many of these poles to complete the wave. Every time we go through the poles, those red and blue sort of Saturn icons disappear. If we keep going at this speed, the time's going to run out too quick, so because that goes at a constant speed. So we need to kind of go to the top, and then we start flying quicker to get through these poles a lot quicker. I don't know why we fly through these poles. I'm sure it's in the manual. It explains why. But after completing that first wave, we then get introduced to some enemies, which zoom towards you and you pick them off. And if you pick off some of those enemies, it makes some of those red icons disappear, rather than just going through the poles, so you can complete the wave a bit quicker. And then it goes to the third wave, which now introduces these sort of bouncing, hopping creatures as well. Let's try and speed up a bit because I'm going to run out of time. And then after clearing the third round, we then take off into space, and then we have to do battle against a bunch of ships until we meet this mothership. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the memories this game invokes in a minute, but I used to love this section in particular because at the time, as I mentioned, I was into Last Starfighter quite a bit and used to watch it to death. And there's a scene in here, so when I was playing through this, it felt like I was playing The Last Starfighter at times. It felt like I was in that film and I was living out what was my favourite film at the time. But it was this bit coming up which really brought it home, and it was like this mothership which to me felt very similar to the mothership that you saw in the film. And I remember playing it when I was playing this as a kid, or trying to get a tang. I was rubbish at this game when I first played it as a kid. I was terrible. Trying to hit, the idea is that with this mothership you have to hit that central flashing square, almost like the exhaust port in Star Wars, but I could never hit it as a kid. And it was like, it felt like the hardest thing in the world. And when you did finally catch it, you really felt like you'd saved the world or saved the galaxy or something like that. So blowing it up like that was just such an amazing feeling for the first time, and being able to progress onto level 2. So the game pretty much repeats from this point on. It gets a bit quicker, you get laser bolts at the side of the poles, and that's pretty much it. It is a very basic and straightforward game. I think the 3D effects not too bad. I think it works okay. It's with the bars and stuff. It compared to say like one of these driving games Ocean did. I think it's Wet Clemens. I think that's how you pronounce it. That actually looked like it was going backwards. This seems like it's going the right direction. It works okay. The graphics are blocky using the expanded sprites, but I think it works fine. It looks nice enough. I think the graphics are nice and colourful. But yeah, it didn't get a great score, mainly probably because of the repetition. I think it missed stuff out from the arcade. But for me, because it's the first game I ever played, it's always going to have a special place in my heart. And you just can't afford, even if it was Robobolt on the 64, I think that would be the case. But it's just something about it. It's like when you first played Sonic the Hedgehog for the very first time on the Mega Drive. You know, when you saw him running around at high speed, and the graphics and the parallax scrolling, and everything was just wow. It's that sensation of seeing something for the first time, or getting that sensation that you've never experienced before. And this was the case with Buck Rogers for me. This was the first time I played a proper computer game, so it was always going to evoke that kind of feeling for me. And I just, every time I play it, I kind of get taken back. I love the sort of bright, almost neon sort of colour schemes that it comes up with, and I just think it works well. I don't think it's a terrible game. I think it's certainly worth loading up and giving it a try if you haven't played it before. There's far worse games that you could play. I think it's just crashed now, actually, funny enough. I'll stop it there anyway. Essentially, the game just repeats with different colour schemes, but yeah, it's a good fun challenge. It's a good enough game, I think, to load up and dedicate some of your time to if you haven't seen it before, and if you want to try something a bit different. But that's the key thing. The key thing for me is just hearing the sounds, seeing it all moving for the first time. When I played this for the first time, it felt like the best thing since sliced bread, because I've not had anything else to compare it to at the time. So that's the reason why I like it so much, I think, and I think that's why I do, and I think that's why it's got such a special place in my heart. It's hard to explain. It's a strange one, really. It's just the way it is, even though it got slagged off, and you'll see that now. I mean, if I kind of flick to, let's go onto the web page. Here we go. So Buck Rogers was actually reviewed in the very first issue of Zap 64, and you can see Julian Rignall there with his back turned. He wasn't happy with it at all. So he'd obviously played the arcade game, and clearly this wasn't anywhere near as good as the arcade game. See, I didn't have that to compare to, so I mean, that's probably one reason why I think it was good as well. But they weren't happy with the graphics. They didn't think the 3D was that good, which I thought was a little bit harsh, because I don't think there was that many sort of games that looked like that really at the time. I don't think. It was fairly early on. I thought they liked the tunes, which is fair enough. Fairly basic stuff really, but it was all good. But yeah, I kind of agree with the last ability. It's looking back now, the one thing I would say is that it does repeat and get repetitive quite quickly. But yeah, it is what it is. It's the very first title I played, and it'll always be a title that I load up every so often just to kind of invoke those memories. So if you haven't seen it before, have a look for yourself and see what you think, and if you don't like it, just switch it off. Hopefully the next one is more of a classic actually, so I probably won't seem so crazy actually for sort of gushing over it. So the next one is a title called Tapper, which was actually the very second game that I loaded up, and here it is. So this is the original copy from over 30 years, so 31 years ago that I originally played. So it's a game where you control this barman. You have to kind of serve drinks to customers, and if you don't serve them quick enough, they'll get hold of you and they'll sling you down the table, and I'll show you that in a second. This is, in comparison to Buck Rogers, this was a far more better received game in general. It was, it got very good scores. It's actually a very good conversion of the arcade machine. It doesn't look exactly the same, obviously, but the graphics are very colourful, and they've done a very good job. Let's load it up. So it uses the same sort of loading system as Buck Rogers, not quite as fast, so I'm going to speed through a little bit. Okay, so yeah, same thing, but the loader's a bit longer, so you actually hear more of the tune, which is yeah. So there's a couple of different renditions of US sort of based themes and that tunes that you get to hear. Anyway, let's get to the end. Okay, so I'm going to kick straight in before the demonstration comes up. So this is Tapper. So we control this guy on the right hand side, and we have these people that are coming through. So we're in a saloon type environment, and we have to just press fire outside, serve them a drink. And we have to do it as quick as we can, and we have to collect these empty glasses that they sling back at us. If we sort of let them get to the end, they'll fall off the edge and we lose a life. So we have to be quick. I'll try and be as quick as I can because I'm on keyboard. There we go. So then as we get to the next level, we get more people that we have to kind of get rid of. So we increase up to about a maximum of 5, I think, in total, as the levels go on. So as well as just firing the drink and collecting the glasses, we can also collect this money, which pulls out some dancers or some entertainment and gives us a bit of a breather, so we can just focus on a couple of people. If we fire glasses at the people who are not concentrating, the glass will just go straight past them. and additionally I can fire too many glasses, which will then smash against the end. So yeah, this was the second game that we loaded up, and yeah, it has a much better reputation. So after completing that level, we then get this little bonus level, which as a kid I couldn't do. I couldn't follow it with my eyes. So you have to kind of follow the can that has been shaken. And if you pick the wrong one, then you it all kind of foams up at you. So we get a change in scenario now. Sort of an outside scene. But yeah, I remember we loaded this up second, and I think my mum even had a go at this one as well, and I just remember them all laughing because with the glasses smashing, and when the guys get to the end and sort of throw you down like this, it was just quite a funny thing to see in a game. So sometimes we just used to let that happen, just to have a bit of fun. But then it gets serious, and then we get to this stage, and then that's when it got really tough because you have about 3 people to get. It gets a bit crazy because you're trying to, as quick as you get rid of people, you got others coming back. So yeah, I haven't mentioned actually that, well, you've probably seen it already, that the idea is that you try and get rid of them by throwing enough drinks so they disappear out the door, and then you clear all of the people off the screen for it to complete level. So it's going to get a bit tough here because I'm on keyboard and it's not quite as responsive as the real thing. So frustratingly, just as you think you cleared, you'll get another one come back and it'll keep going on like that. There we go. Right. So I don't know how much further I'm going to get. But beyond this, you've got like a punk scene where you've got loads of punk rockers and that you have to serve. And then if you get beyond that, I think it goes on to an alien planet and you're sort of serving aliens, which is quite funny. I don't think there's anything else on it, but if you look on YouTube, there'll be a long play of this game. You can see all the levels for yourself. I'm struggling on this keyboard. I'm going to get a proper joystick set up on it, I think, for next time. Okay, I think I'll finish it there. Okay, so this is definitely, if you haven't seen Tapper before, then I highly recommend sort of checking it out. Compared to Buck Rogers, I think you're more likely to enjoy this game in comparison because of the reputation it has and because it is actually a very decent game. Again, there's the rose tinted glasses aspect for me still, but it's kind of a justified one. It's one where you're probably not going to think I'm so crazy. As a result, it's a fantastic conversion, and it's a good party game as well. If you've got friends around, just to have a 2-player game and keep swapping the joystick around, it's a really good. I think it would be a really good game with drinks, though. I haven't had the opportunity to play it with drinks, unfortunately. Yeah, so there we have it. So that's the end of the retrospective for this time. So hopefully wasn't so dry compared to the last one. I think the next title I'm going to look at is another Commodore 64 one, and we're going to look at Trolley Wally, which was another title which when I first got my own 64 that I grew up playing. So that'll be the next one. So thanks for listening.